Thank you for joining me for another episode of Wake and Empower TV. I'm your host, Ethan Fox. I'm joined today by Bridget Nielsen, who has a lot of expertise in the Hybrid Kids program and also is working to help people to discover their life missions and to manifest those in the three-dimensional reality. We speak at length today about the Hybrid program, and we also get into what kind of tools and resources individuals can use to move toward their life missions, and also the right kind of diet and lifestyle that will be appropriate to living a healthy, vibrant life and more in alignment with who you came here to be. A lot of very interesting topics we discussed today. I also want to tell you that we are working on a kids retreat program for next year, 2018, in the summer in the Michigan area, and it'll be a 3-day event where we have a lot of very incredible classes, from telekinesis to telepathy to aura reading, channeling, mediumship, and also some classes on multidimensional psychology, where we help the kids to adjust to life in the three-dimensional world and to learn how to deal with extraterrestrial contact and their sensitivity to the energies of their environment. So a lot of very interesting topics, and we're going to create that in a very Harry Potter type of fun environment for them, and lots of fun activities in between classes as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing the details on where you can sign up your kids for that program, and in the next couple of months. And if you, in the meantime, if you'd like to stay in touch, you can find out more about that on our Facebook page for Conscious Youth, and we'll be announcing all the details of that program once it's released. So a lot of great things, including our Awaken Empowered Expo this November 10th, 11th, and 12th. If you'd like to join us, we'll have some really amazing presenters there that we haven't fully announced yet, but a lot of interesting topics like crop circles with Barbara Lamb. We also have Laurie McDonald, who will be speaking on the Mandela effect, and also what she's learned from her many client sessions using hypnosis as far as the extraterrestrial contact experiences people have had. A lot of other amazing workshops on auras and telekinesis, aerokinesis. Michaela Sheldon, who will be channeling multidimensional consciousness and also offering a private workshop there. A lot of others that we've yet to announce, so stay tuned for that in future episodes of Awaken Power TV. I'll share with you some of the other presenters we have. So join us. That'll be held at the beautiful Doubletree Hotel in downtown Detroit on November 10th, 11th, and 12th. So we hope to see you there. So without any further delay, I'd like to bring on my special guest today, Bridget Nielsen. Hi, Bridget. Welcome to Awaken Power TV. It's so nice to have you back again. It's been about a year or so since we've spoken last time, and you've certainly been up to a lot of very interesting things since then. So welcome back to the show. And where are you? It's a little different setting than the last time I remember. Where are you calling from today?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm calling in from the East Coast, from Massachusetts. I'm out of Sedona for the moment and traveling the world. So this is where I am today.
And for those viewers who may not have seen the original show that I had with you, or maybe unfamiliar with your work, which I'm sure most people who watch the show are familiar, but for those who aren't, can you give us a little bit of background about, just your childhood, anything that you've done education-wise and so on, and the transition of that journey to what you ended up doing, that you're currently doing?
Yeah, I guess where does it start? I mean, it just starts with classically me being born a bit more open and sensitive, like most of us are in recent generations. And then, of course, through the conditioned public schooling system, it's like knocks it out of you for a while. And that was the case for me. And then after college and after kind of coming out of all of that and going into the corporate world for a little bit, I was like, okay, let's go back to where I was at like 4 or 5 years old, because that is the best place. So that's what I did, really, was start to go on my own spiritual journey and explore myself, and really just open up the capacities that I've always had and live them in a new way.
Yeah, for those who may not be as familiar with your background, they may want to. I want to suggest watching the earlier show that I did with you, where we really went much more in depth. Now you become quite a figurehead in the extraterrestrial contact field, in particular, dealing with hybrid children and that particular conversation. To establish a little bit of background for that, what kind of experiences did you have in your own childhood that were early indications that you had this sort of contact?
Right. My early indications would have been missing like periods, different things, kind of a blurred, some segments of my childhood being a little bit blurred. Like a lot of people note that is like a forgetfulness because it's kind of been screened what really happened. But through my regressions, I really opened up to really what was going on, which was a lot of ET contact and a lot of abduction stuff going on. So that's really what was going on in my childhood.
And well, so now you're mostly based in Sedona, but I do see you doing a lot of traveling to different parts of the world. And Sedona being one of the major vortex places on the planet. Now you've also done events in Hawaii, another vortex point. Where have you found to be the most, in your opinion, the most focused energy or vortex center that you've experienced personally?
The most focused one?
Well, the one where you think would be the most beneficial for people to go, where they could evolve more spiritually at a more rapid pace or have different kinds of experiences or higher level of contact.
That's a great question. I mean, as far as contact, Sedona is fantastic. It would be that each place has a completely different medicine, and it just really is about kind of coming into clarification with yourself of where you're at, what you need, and then what your matchup energetic sacred site location would be that corresponds with it. So for me, it's like, okay, well, Sedona's super powerful, super transformational. And it's like, but to do that all the time isn't necessarily balanced. You need the feminine, you need the yin, you need the mindlessness and like a more sacred connection in a different kind of way. So I go to Hawaii for that, or I go to different places. So it's really about figuring out what you need and then aligning the place that has that.
Yeah, I've seen you that you're doing a lot of events, in particular in Hawaii, where people get an opportunity to interact with dolphins and I believe whales and things like that. Now, what I've been finding in my circles and people that I work with because of my show and all the different things, I'm involved with a lot of very gifted people and intuitive channels. And what I've noticed over the past year is a lot of people are starting to channel dolphin energies. And I'm curious your perspective on that. What is the significance of physical dolphins? Is there any connection to the dolphin consciousness that's coming out in a lot of channeling? And what's the role really of dolphins and whales in the future of our consciousness, if any?
I love that. I would say, well, one, it's awesome that more of it's coming out because that means that playfulness is abound in our world. So anytime that like the dolphin consciousness is coming out more, it's like, yes, we're going in a good direction. So I love hearing that. But as far as what the dolphins and whales have in store for us, it's really, I mean, they are an alien consciousness on planet Earth, originally from Syrian connection. So they are aliens on Earth. So for one, it's to be like, hey, we've been here all along. You're like looking out there, but like we're right here next to you. So one thing is just expanding our own human consciousness to see the diversity of frequencies on our own planet. And then, of course, the dolphins and the whales being hyper profound and communicating and interacting in ways that we are going towards, like with telepathy, with energetics, with the sonar, like holographic imagery that they use to communicate. So in so many ways, it's really they're kind of representing a future aspect of where our consciousness would go in a really positive direction.
And have any of your participants in your workshops or yourself, Have you experienced anything interesting or any kind of multidimensional experiences or contact when you're interacting with dolphins and whales?
I definitely have. I've had profound experiences of, I mean, it depends. Each person's experience is going to be very different because they're such beautiful reflectors of what we need, and they can sense everything about your chakras, everything about your energetics. So they might give you what you need in a negative sense, or they might give you what you need in a positive sense. But for me, there's been a ton of activations, particularly my heart chakra, to the degree of I didn't actually know that my heart chakra could pound and expand and hurt and throb with love as much as it could, as being with them and having that open. And one of the ladies, one of our adventures, it was hilarious, this woman from Australia, she got in the water and she had an ecstatic experience. She comes back on the boat and she's like, I think I'm having a heart attack. I think like something's going on, something's going wrong. And I'm like, calm down. I'm like, that's actually your heart. Like, you're not having a problem. That it's just, that's the first time you actually feeling it to its full capacity. So, so yeah, just profound experiences like that, and definitely opening up telepathy, opening up higher dimensions, dream world connections, in and amongst, swimming with them. It's not necessarily just swimming with them. It's when you go home and sleep and then having continued profound experiences. So it's an ever evolving merging once contact takes place with them.
So what along those lines, what does the physical heart and physical heart sensation have to do with the opening of the heart? Because a lot of people in our westernized society especially end up having heart disease and heart attacks. And what's the significance of all that?
I mean, as well as I do, it's like that the emotional body of the West is our challenge. As I've studied different Qigong methods, it's like, okay, the West does actually a pretty good job with the mind and with the third eye and like that connection. But when it comes to the heart, which is the seat of the emotions really, and love and connection, we're not trained to know what that can actually be. And there's just hasn't been a template in our society and in our families. And that's not to say for everyone, because some people have super loving mothers or grandmothers or people in their lives that really bring that warmth. And so they can feel it, but not to the degree that we are meant to experience. And I think that's one of the gifts of the dolphins and taking it to the next level. And I mean, there's profound healings that can take place with the dolphins and the whales, where people that have cancer, people that have heart diseases or different things are completely cured, so it's just opening up to that next level.
So if the United States is really skilled at developing the mind, then is there part of the world that's more focused on the heart, do you think? Or if somebody, or Western cultures, such as in the United States, tend to be more closed in their hearts, how can somebody like that, what sort of practices or places can they go in the world to open the heart?
That's a great question. I mean, Hawaii, for one, which is the heart chakra of planet Earth. And there's other representative places that have deep, beautiful, warming heart energy. People say Bali, people say in Europe that it's Glastonbury. To me, any place that is representative of the mother, which would be places that are warm, that are tropical, that are abundant, that can take you in and hold you, and it doesn't have to be kind of a fight or a grind to get through and have to chug a lug in like day-to-day mainstream culture. I think part of it's just getting out of it, getting out of the mental mind race and taking a break, and it's our natural self. So when we do that for ourselves, we can come back to our center, and it's an autopilot response of going back to your normal state. It actually doesn't take much effort. It's actually surrender.
Now, I recently had Mary Rodwell on my show. I'm sure you're familiar with her, right? Her work.
Yeah.
And so you've become really known in the hybrid children field of work. Do you, and I know you do a lot of sessions with people around the world, do you primarily work with adults or children, or a pretty good mix?
It would be a nice range. Pretty much from like 20 to 60, I would say.
And what do your sessions look like? What do they entail?
It's a variety of different things. I mean, one of the things that's changed over the years for me has really been coming back down to earth. Because there is such, a desire and a need to go out. And with that, it can be also escapism. So part of what's come up for me in the past year is really being like, down here has some awesome stuff. Down here, there's even aliens, like we just said. Down here, it can be warm. It can be gentle for the most sensitive of beings. And so one of the big things is, one, being okay here on earth, being okay in your body, and then really finding your purpose and mission to be here. I mean, and that's one of the reasons that people go out, is because they can't, live out and feel what they want to be and express here. So in my sessions, it's really now a lot more about the purpose, mission, about coming back into the day-to-day harmony of life. So orienting to that. And of course, it goes into ET hybrid connections and starseed orientation, as well as like past lives and different things like that. But I'm really about, coming back in, coming home.
Yeah, last time we talked, it seemed like your focus is more toward the spiritual hybrid type of conversation. So I see it's changed a lot. And you've actually become, or at least you're becoming, more known as a spiritual teacher as opposed to just an expert in the hybridization project, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting about that is to make contact with the hybrids, to make first contact with extraterrestrials, we have to shift ourselves, physically, whether it's health, emotionally, like on all levels in our everyday life. So it seems like it's different. It's like, well, now it's this whole other thing. And it's like, no, it's the same thing. It's just another part of the package deal that's necessary to truly make contact.
To give our new viewers a little bit of context, can you talk about the hybridization project and how you became aware of that and any involvement you've had with that?
Yeah. So the hybridization program, I always love like when I have to give this spiel, because it's fun to see what direction it goes. But it's pretty much the key to the hybridization program is it's really integrating the galactics with Earth. So it's bridging the mind wipe of that we are alone in this universe to we are connected in this universe. And the way that it's done through this particular program is that through the abductions that happened, the alien abductions that happened, and through other things, certain people, lots of people were taken up in ships and their genetic material was used to create different hybrid civilizations and to create specifically these hybrid kids. So for me, my connection is the hybrid kids, and they are our actual genetic children mixed with star connection children, genetics. And in that mixing, it's like the meeting of heaven and earth, and they will be the ones that first come to earth in these different sacred sites that will help open contact, because it'll orient our frequency to extraterrestrials rather than like just the Pleiadians landing. Like right now, it's like an in-between frequency for us to be able to acclimate, like small populations of humanity to start acclimate, and then bridging over the 100th monkey so that the rest of the collective can actually handle those increased extraterrestrial frequencies.
And so none of these hybrid children are currently in our physical three-dimensional reality?
Well, I mean, that's where it gets a little bit interesting, because they are, like that are pretty much like one codon away from being actual hybrids, the children being born today who are just like freaking blowing our minds with their star energy. And yet they're raised in this culture, in this world. So if you take, say, the same hybrid kid and a human kid, but they're pretty much the same, if you raise the hybrid kid on a spaceship, being like, you can do anything. You can like teleport. You can, like all the expanses of beliefs and concepts are just free. And then you raise this kid and it's like, okay, go off to school, little Johnny, and then you have to make money and good luck on earth. They're gonna end up in different places, even if you're starting with the same cloth. So yes, they are. And at the same time, they've chosen a different kind of challenge to be on earth. I mean, it's a hard challenge to be on earth and to be so high and to be of such beautiful, loving frequency. And you see these kids coming out, that are like 4, telling their moms like, why they want to be vegetarians, or like, why can't we all be loving, and having this conviction and passion. These souls have really chosen and are ready to play this game on earth with us.
And yeah, Mary had a lot of very interesting stories to share of some of the children she's met. What are some of the interesting interactions you've had with children on Earth today, and some of their gifts and abilities and awarenesses?
One of the big things that has caught my eye is actually eye contact and awareness. Whereas I remember seeing kids like, say, 10 years ago, and they were looking kind of like in your field. They couldn't quite orient like who was a human face and what was, the environment around them. And nowadays you see someone like come out of the womb and they're like staring at you, that they like have locked on and are fully present, fully aware, conscious beings. They don't need like an orientation as much. That's one of the things that's been like really profound to watch in me, and what I've explored. And then of course, just any of the abilities like the telepathy, that they're just so telepathic, and remembering their connections, just 3 years old being like, Mom, I was in this life over here doing this other thing, or like I came from that star, and explaining all these details about it. Just the remembrance of their greater soul self is really profound.
So what do you foresee as the future of the hybridization project? So I'm assuming you're saying that those children are going to slowly integrate into our society over time. What's separating that from happening now? Is it just that the frequency of the planet isn't quite at their level yet, or something else?
Yeah. So the thing is they interact as a hive mind in a kind of way, as a collective consciousness, just as many of the other extraterrestrial civilizations do. They're all telepathic. And so they are a collective unity. And we're coming into this space of collective unity and oneness as a humanity. But we're still in separate houses, going to separate jobs, all these separate things. So I think the connection is, getting our frequencies, but not only our frequencies, but our day-to-day actions really in alignment with the type of environment that they could come into. So it's like truly living your mission and your gifts, and truly being kind and in community with everyone around you. And in this case, in sacred sites, using other forms of currency that, of the value of people and resources rather than money, eating in a higher vibrational way. So it's really like setting up the new systems in these high vibrational places, so that, and having the people in this community collective consciousness that can then be the container to actually meet them, so that the collective can meet the collective. Whereas right now it's like, they're just going to land on someone's like their mom's driveway and then just like sit in the box house for the next 20 years and like be sent to school. These platforms aren't created. And so it's the idea of the hybridization program too, is ushering in the human imagination, like my imagination and the other parents and the other people interested in the subject, to actually be like, okay, well, what could it be like for the hybrids? What would they need? And in that question, it actually brings the solution of what we need and what the future children need on Earth as well.
And what do you perceive as, so a lot of the children that you're speaking about that are incarnated on Earth now, that are much more advanced, what is it that they need that they're not currently getting from society or their parents, that maybe parents in society could adjust to and help them to live more to their fullest potential?
Yeah. I mean, my personal opinion would be that it's for the parents to truly start getting to live in the wondrous way that they always dreamed and actually doing it, to where they don't have to necessarily go to 9-to-5 jobs, but where they can make a living or be taken care of out of their passion, out of what they love to do. And from that place, then creating an environment that is what they love, that nurtures them. And so that the kid comes into a space of where, instead of seeing like parents that, love, maybe the spiritual topics, but go to their job or still have these constraints, that the parents have broken out of the constraints and created a new type of world, a new kind of way of living for the kid to come into, so that they can then be like, wow, anything is possible. And then from that space, the kid's like, well, I'm going to build this spaceship because I still remember like how to do the physics of this different thing. And then the kid can actually create what it wants to create. So it's really just, I think, creating a different template than the cultural template matrix that we have put ourselves into right now.
I think you're a really good example of that. You went from a very conventional mainstream life and career path to living on the opposite extreme, a very unconventional one. And I meet a lot of people these days who are awakening or who have awakened in recent years, and they find themselves in lifestyles and career paths that are no longer resonate with who they are becoming. And they don't know. Many of them are in fear of, how do I make the transition from this to something else that is more true to my purpose and what I feel is what I need to do. So can you share, what was it like for you to make that transition, and even now as you continue in this direction that is obviously more in line with who you are?
Yeah, it's a powerful transition. And even in the transition, for those that are going through it, the transition itself has its own value in so many ways. And especially so that when you do finally transition, you can kind of like, in a way, be in the position I am right now and be like, okay, I know what you were going through, like, and I can help you out of it. So the transition is teaching us how to help others in the transition. But as far as how I feel about it and how I came through it, I mean, for me, I was in a position where it always comes down to like not having a choice, where it's like, okay, I'd rather, the worst case scenario, the one that I always like created in my head was, worst case scenario, I'll make my grandma buy me a ticket to Thailand and I'll just sit on the beach for like $2 a day and I'll figure things out from there. So it was one of those things where the two worlds don't mix very well. And so it's like, well, I still want my house and my car and my kids' college tuition, but then I want this other life. And for me, it was the dissolving of all the things that society, or even like my fear or like my security, said that I thought that I needed, into, well, what do I really need? And what do I need on a physical level, like as far as like, a place to live, good food to eat, but what does my soul need? And I think that's really the big question, is like, what does your soul need? And as I'm sitting here right now, it's like a pretty extraordinary like environment. I've got like, you've got this like pond and stuff behind me, and it's soul fulfilling. And that I think is the hidden variable that isn't in the equation of the other program. And when that is the ultimate question, and when that is the highest priority to act on, everything can start falling into place, and the housing and the food and the resources to be all of that being taken care of will come about.
I think if most people watch you and the work that you've been doing, and you've become really popular exponentially, really in the last several years, most people would think you've got it all figured out and everything's moving very smoothly. I know you experienced some fears early on in the journey, but is the path completely smooth at a certain point, or do you still hit roadblocks and still experience some difficulties that you have to overcome as you go?
That's a great question. And yeah, I still do hit roadblocks, and there still is those moments of like fear or uncertainty that come up. But once that initial threshold through the fog of like, what am I going to do? And it's kind of like you're in the Matrix like world, and then you like have to walk through the fog. You have to take that leap of faith and like that step over the cliff. And then once you do really the first time and it works out, which it always really does if you're going towards your soul and your heart's calling in an intelligent way, not just kind of like, I'm quitting everything, but like you have like something to replace it, like something that takes its place in a really positive way. Once you do that once, the momentum is built, and then you can do it again, and then you can do it again. And so for me, like right now, when I got the call to leave Sedona, I was like, oh, like, what am I going to do? Like, where am I going to go? What is my life going to be? And it was a real rebirth for me after, 5 years of being there. And that's where I've like kind of established, my life, or like this next level of security or whatever. It was like, I've been in this position before, and it works out. And actually it works out even better sometimes. Like in that movement, in that change, synchronicity has a lot more room to play with you. And so as far as challenges and stuff, yeah, those fears come up, and I just have to be with them, witness them, and honor them, and know that it works out. And I think it's that first threshold of doing it so that you know that it actually works.
Now, a lot of people I've spoken with, and just my own assessment of things that are going on in the world, it seems like in order to, and a lot of, you mentioned earlier, some of the children nowadays are telepathic and have a lot of other gifts. And most extraterrestrial races, from my understanding, are telepathic, right? They communicate telepathically. They don't really communicate with spoken word.
Yeah, they can, but they just don't need to. It's an interesting thing as I've explored that, because really telepathy is telepathy, and it's empathizing. And one of the reasons that we can't quite go there yet is because we're not in our full feeling sense. And if we fully felt what the other person was feeling, it would reveal a lot about the hidden judgments or fears within us, and the hidden judgments and fears in them. So vulnerability is one of the key bridgers to telepathy, because you're all exposed, and so telepathy is really mixed in with exposure. And in our culture right now, with so much being hidden within ourselves, within our governments, as we let that come up, we can just freely then connect and be truly telepathic and telepathic.
So is that a heart? Is that a world? Do you think that what's separating us from that is more of a heart-centered world, or is it from a head-centered world or mind-centered world that we are in today, or is it something else? What is the gap that we need to bridge to get to that future?
I think you're right. I think it's a heart-centered world. It's coming from here into here, because once you're in here, then you can feel. And telepathy is through the heart communication. So yeah, that's what I would say.
So a lot of these kids that are being born today have a lot of these gifts already. They have these tendencies, and they're highly sensitive. What about the adults who either have been awakened for a while or going through these awakening experiences? Do you think it's possible for them to evolve to that point where they can express these higher awarenesses and gifts and abilities, even similar to some of the kids being born today? Is it possible for them to genetically evolve to that level through certain practices, or any kind of going to maybe vortex centers in the planet? Or do you think that our genetics to a certain degree are fixed when we're at a certain age, versus being born into the world with more advanced genetics?
That's a really good question. I would say that I liken it to a computer. That's the way that, like, when I have this conversation with other people about this topic, it's like we're given certain hardware, like what is possible. And then you put like a software program onto that. And so the hardware would be like the genetics. So in most cases, I've seen that unless you're a pretty old indigo generation, most of the generations alive right now have the hardware that can update the software. So in that, like, oh, I can do this meditation, I can go to this sacred site, I can like let go of this old way of being and open to this new one, which is implementing the new software and upgrade to open the capacities. So I would say that it is possible. I would say that the hardware could be a little bit dusty in some of the older generations, just because it's been entrained. And so it's kind of like glitching as the new upgrades are happening. Or it might need spaciousness to be cleared off, which would mean actual physical detoxing, because there's just like the calcification and the GMOs and all the stuff that happens in this physical world kind of clogs up the system. So I do feel like it's possible to the degree of the youngest kids being born. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure anything is possible. So yes, but going pretty far and opening the capacities, I think is very, very possible.
So sort of like the latest Microsoft Windows update that never works the first time it comes out?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this isn't working, but like finally it kind of like chug-a-lugs and like gets in there.
So what's happening? Have you still been in contact with the hybrid children and extraterrestrial? I imagine you're channeling that information somehow. Is that still going on, or has your focus in the past year, because it's become more grounded, have you sort of isolated yourself from that?
I have had continued contact. It has not been to the same degree, but they've told me, they're like, if we just continue to come around you, then you'll continue to relay that information, you'll continue to just focus on it, and then you won't be doing the other groundwork that you particularly need to do. So for my particular purpose, I'm supposed to bridge, like this to Earth, and other people doing the hybrid work, doing the extraterrestrial work, they might just need to fully focus on that. But for me, it's really like bringing it all the way. So I have had contact. It's less. And for me, that's kind of hard, because I'm like, hey, where'd you go, buddies? And I'm like, I feel that part of me, that ego part of me, that like seeks for that. But I do have pretty special moments. I had a moment about a month ago in Asheville that was like, whoa, okay, hello again. How you doing? Like, those profound connections that it's like, we're with you, just keep on going. And this is just as significant. So I think that's part of it is the judgment in spirituality of, okay, well, you have to be connecting with every archangel at every moment and like activating every chakra. And it's like, yeah. And it's just as significant to, make sure to eat well and be in nature and be kind to the person at the post office.
And have you learned anything new from this more recent experiences of contact that you didn't share before?
Yeah, it was, I had this deep, profound dream remembrance of actually my future self in a future generation. So one of the big things that's been coming in as I've been doing more of the grounding work and the earth work is the earth work is connected very much to the ancestors. And when we talk about those lineages of the past, because time is nonlinear, we're talking about the lineages of the future. So I actually met my future great-great-grandchild that in that space, because in that time, they actually merge with the cosmic genetics and everything. They're actually kind of alien human. So, and it was deeply profound to see what our future can be like, and the future on Earth can be like, and that's, yeah. So it was more of a transmissional thing. I did a video on it about the 7 generations to come and like really orienting ourselves to that, and that is a really shifting perspective that will take us much farther as a species.
Well, since incarnation is nonlinear, do you believe that changes that you make in this life can also go backward in your incarnations in linear time? So say you had an incarnation in the 1800s, do changes that you make or awarenesses, or maybe you resolve some kind of a trauma that occurred in a previous lifetime in this linear timeline, does that go back and correct for experiences you had in other incarnations that were previous to this one where they originally occurred?
Yes. Yes. I have like a nice communication between a lot of my other lives. That's one of the capacities that I came in with, was to be able to perceive all of them. And there's a webbing. Well, one, there's like a karmic thing, right? So when you complete kind of like the karmic lesson that streams through a lot of different lives in this life, it kind of breaks that chain or breaks that karma going into the other lives. So if anything that I feel this softening and this relaxation of whatever intensity or trauma that these other lives that we have had to experience to get to the point of us right now breaking through. So whether that's, for instance, like I'm in Massachusetts right now, which is like hotbed of witch burning and stuff. And I've had a lot of different witch incarnations that have died in those ways. And so like for me right now, bringing to fruition, even right now, I'm like, even looking at the screen and seeing my neck red right there. And that happens a lot when I do different videos and stuff. And I'm like, me as a woman in this life speaking on these topics publicly, like that is such deep, profound healing for the female ancestors, for these other lives where we've had these capacities, but we were killed for them. And so it does bring deep healing. And I've felt that in those other incarnations where it's like, oh, like my life kind of like wasn't in vain, because it ended up bringing you to do more and be more so that I can be, expressed in it through you in a way. So I do feel that.
So your work nowadays, it sounds like it's more focused toward helping people live their life missions and things like that. Are these past incarnations and traumas like you just described in any way related to people's inability to live to their potential in this life? And do we need to go back and resolve those in order to move forward, or can we just simply move forward and they'll resolve in the moving forward?
It's a great question. It's like, which one, like the chicken or the egg, it's that exact paradox, because moving forward does completely helps all of the incarnational aspects. But then, we're like inhibited because we have these past traumas of it. So for me, it's really about becoming conscious of it. Like when I first was on this path doing my first like spiritual trainings years and years ago, it was like I was scared of the forest at night. And I was like, why is this? And then it came about that I was like burnt as, killed as a witch. And so it's one of those things about just bringing it to consciousness and then being like, okay, well, I don't have to play out that story anymore. So it's about rewriting the story, figuring out what the old story was, of whatever that karma, whatever that belief, whatever that energetic and physical inhibition is, and then going forward and being like, okay, well, for the sake of me, for the sake of everyone, I'm going to step into this, and it is a much safer world. I mean, there's a lot going on, with people that are like really breaking the old system. But as far as us paving the way of light, we're fine. So it's a lot safer nowadays. And I think just that alone is a nice permission slip to step into our life passion and calling.
For those people who may want to do that but feel a bit stuck in their current reality or maybe the ways of conventional society, how does someone discover what their life passion and life mission is if they don't currently have an idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have some videos on that that you'll go watch. But it really, it comes down to really clarifying, besides needing to make money and besides doing what you think you should be doing, what do you like to do? And what are your gifts? So it's like, what did you like to do as a kid? I always bring it back to that one, because what you like to do as a kid, and it's not just a one-to-one, like, I like to play basketball. It's like, well, I like to bring together the people to then play basketball, getting into those fine details where it really is revealing of the true, like, innocent nature of what you have to give and what gifts are in that. So it's like, and I have a tendency to be able to be a good communicator. And so it's like, okay, well, then bring people together because you can communicate well. It actually ends up being quite simple once you can get in a space where everything else is pushed aside. And that's why I think getting out of our everyday lives and taking time in sacred sites, or just taking time in nature to have a fresh mind that's outside of the matrix programming is really helpful to begin to ask those questions. So if it's like at home at the end of a work day and you're like, all right, well, what is my life mission? It's like, don't try, just get some rest, like that's intense, but create deep, cultivated, immersive times for those explorations, and then they'll come about.
I think a lot of people watching shows like this and who are of a more spiritual awareness tend to have a difficulty with much of the matrix construct that you're talking about, and primarily the idea of money for exchange of, goods and services and things like that. Do you think that we need to completely try to function without money, or is that necessary for us to live in full alignment with our life purpose, or is it okay to work with that within the construct? Does that in any way prevent us from living to our fullest potential?
I truly feel that whole money, because are you kind of speaking to the idea of like where pure spiritual people shouldn't get paid? Is that kind of like that kind of thing?
Right. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people who are more spiritually conscious and they become more spiritually conscious, I think they have difficulty, and a lot of people argue about the financial structure and we need to do away with it entirely. But the problem is we're living in a society that has that structure to it. So if we want to function in regular society and do the things we do, then money is just a part of that. But do you feel that yeah, I mean, in a very simple way, what you said, should spiritual people get paid, or should spiritual people simply, work without money?
Yeah. Well, I think that spiritual people, as well as just like anyone who is wanting the world to go into a positive direction, are completely need the resources to be able to do that. And inherently right now, the medium of our value is in money. And so it's like, take it, do it, like own it, in a really good way, so that you can then create the platform so that you can have this show that you have right now, so that people can have, say, for instance, the house I'm in right now. It's a gift of one of my friends that his parents are letting all the people that are working on these different concepts live in, so that we can like do it. So having the resources to create those platforms is critical. If anything, getting money or whatever resources into the hands of people that can do good with it, I think is really important. And as far as it being like money and money is the root of all evil, it's like, no, it's just one step removed. And I think that there is something about bringing your current and your own self-value energy back into yourself, and not putting it outside of yourself through money as much as you can. So that's why I like doing certain things like trades as much as possible, or things that can just feel valuable in a new way, where you see resource for resource, value for value in its integrity, rather than having it be all convoluted. I think that's a really healthy way of transitioning.
And do you think that in our lifetimes that we're going to see a future where money is not a matter, or or is it simply going to continue to exist and we'll just learn to work with it in a more higher vibrational way?
I feel like it'll end up going. I feel like it'll end up transitioning. And us, stepping into a new way that's a more accurate representation of who we are. As we shift, like, it will shift too, because we won't place our value or give our value as debt to someone else. So I feel like it has to shift. And in the meantime, as it isn't, that's okay. We can just look at it in a new way.
What are some ways that we can, as human beings, in particular human adults who may not be as developed as some of the kids alive today, how can we, what kind of techniques or tools would you suggest that people use to enhance their development, spiritually speaking?
Smiling. and I'm like saying that kind of facetiously, but like truly, the key to get to the more advanced kid stage is to actually like be a kid again. And I think that approaching and still doing all of the spiritual modalities through that lens. So it's like, if you're doing meditation, like for instance, meditation has been a very challenging thing for me. And I'm doing this new kind of meditation called Kunlun. It's the Kunlun method. It's very powerful. And one of the keys to the practice is you have to have a smile on your face the whole time. And since I started doing that, I'm like, yes, like this can be playful. So bringing a playful approach to any part of the spiritual modality that you do, if you're working with crystals, if you're meditating, if you're doing Tai Chi, if you're, whatever you're doing, bringing playfulness to it, I think is one of the biggest ways to awaken those capacities. Fastest route.
I know you're a big proponent of diet and eating a certain kind of, having a certain kind of dietary lifestyle. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. It's like these are vessels, where we have these little like bodysuit and we're like little animals and we have to take care of them. And it becomes challenging at times, being in the intense pressures of society to do that. But ultimately, like, it's really key for our vibration. And it was one of the big things that came through when I moved to Sedona. I'm like, okay, moving to Sedona, connecting with the hybrid children and extraterrestrials. And it was like, and food is the huge thing that you're going to be doing. And so I like really transitioned into more of a vegan lifestyle, more raw food, and really understanding how to work with food to shift my consciousness. And I really feel a difference. And then, of course, being balanced with it. If we're eating with the season is like my topic of all topics, because it's so important. Because if you're like in Canada eating bananas all winter, like that's not good. So really like staying fluid with how you're working and what kind of fuel your particular work takes, the environment that you're in, and then seeing what that attracts. So like if you're in like a really tough job or you're in like a harsh climate and then you have to eat these denser foods, it's like, well, maybe I should change those things and then I can eat these lighter foods. So it's this whole package deal. And really just coming back to living foods is going to be really helpful.
So are you suggesting primarily a vegan live food type of diet, or meat's part of that too, depending on where you live?
It's so dependent on where people are at. Because if you're in like, an intense city doing construction, it's like being a vegan, what are you doing? No, like, you can, but like the consciousness of eating lighter foods, of eating living foods that say don't include animal products, it requires a lifestyle that can maintain that. So just making sure that that's in alignment and listening to your body. The big thing is to begin to really nourish it and detox. So the details of like, I'm a vegan or like I'm a raw foodist, that like those aren't a good long-term solution, but going, okay, I'm going to nourish myself with highly nutrient organic food. and I'm going to make sure to detox myself and really sweat and get all the crap out. Those would be the two like best approaches, and then the details of how those unfold will come about.
So you're saying in depending on lifestyle and where you live, it may be necessary to eat more dense foods, even animal products then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I think that's fair.
and are animal products always more dense than vegan or vegetarian vegetable types of foods?
Well, that's it, frequency-wise, yes, but density doesn't always mean bad. Density can mean nourishment. You know, like it's something like ghee, for instance. It's like that's super nourishing to the gut, to the nervous system, to the whole energetic being, to ground. And so it's like, okay, well, you can't be like, well, that's animal product, that's low vibration, it's out. And it's like, well, is that what you need? You know, so it's just really getting your system up and running in a proper way so that you can feel what you actually need. That's a big thing too, is it's that idea of, well, eat whatever like your body, you know, craves or what your intuition says. And it's like, well, our intuition's skewed and what our body is craving is skewed until we do the proper cleansing, until we introduce the things that it could have and start to transition. And then you can trust your body and like what it needs. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky, because it's like you can't truly trust your body because you programmed your body to need a certain thing based on all these environmental things. So yeah, it's a complex thing, but really it just comes down to nourishment, taking care of yourself, and detoxing.
Does food also contain, other than nourishment, such as vitamins, minerals, and enzymes, and that kind of thing that obviously modern science has identified as nourishment, do you believe that food also contains genetic information that alters us genetically versus depending on what you're eating?
Yeah, I mean, especially like GMO foods. I mean, it's definitely going to alter us, you know, and it's like setting us up in not a so positive way. So if anything, organic non-GMO would be the most important, and what kind of food doesn't matter as much as the quality. So I definitely feel an influence. As far as like changing our genetics, I mean, yes, I mean, it would be influencing, but definitely energetics. I mean, just even the difference of me eating the food out here that's from the local farms versus like the organic food from Mexico, it's like night and day different. Or like, of course, wild crafted, you know, avocados and mangoes from Hawaii, it's going to be very different than like something else. And so really sourcing the energetics and is going to alter everything.
So food contains information in a manner of speaking, so multidimensional information depending on where it's grown and the density of the food and what kind of food it is.
Absolutely. And especially the water. I mean, the water is so key, you know, and most even organic food is being grown by municipal, you know, water craziness. And so it's like spring fed food. I mean, the nutrient density goes up immensely on the different studies when it's fed with spring water and well water and stuff like that. So it does alter and it does contain information. Absolutely.
So that may explain why some waters in ancient times were considered holy and people had mystical experiences from it. Just the area that the water was in, or maybe it was blessed somehow. It gave it certain kind of information or vibrational quality that altered consciousness.
Oh yeah, like absolutely. And some contains like higher levels of like DMT information and such. Like I've swam in waterfalls and full on like had like almost psychedelic experiences just from interacting with the water in particular areas, or had tremendous light that comes into my body, like drinking the water from like the Chalice Well in Glastonbury and stuff like that. So the water does contain information, and and putting, of course, the intention into the water is key, but also sourcing it from places that have that living frequency. I mean, of anything, like really, really keen in the water and blessing the water is everything.
So it sounds like we should be purposeful in what we eat and what we choose to eat. But if someone is really interested in growing more spiritually and raising their consciousness, is there a particular kind of dietary approach that they should that you would suggest that they consider?
Yeah. So organic non-GMO, awesome water, living foods, which means like fruits and vegetables, sprouting your nuts and seeds, which just means soaking them, nothing extravagant. And that as the basis, because you can say all the things that you don't eat. I can be like, well, I'm gluten-free, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. But I'm like, okay, well, what do I consume? And having those be the basis. Now, the thing is our bodies especially our guts, are just a mess from antibiotics and all the different stuff that's gone on. So really building back up the gut is key with different probiotics, with fermented foods, so that you're able to digest these different fruits and vegetables and the nuts and seeds, because it's a different operating system. Like we've said, we have to upgrade the operating system, so there is a transition. And in that transition, it might require, depending on your circumstance, ghee or bone broth, which, I mean, I don't like saying that at all, but it might, because that will create long-term benefit for you. And you might need it for a short time so that you can truly go long-term, because it's one of those things, if you just start like, I'm raw vegan, your body can't do it. And so you have to transition it. So really transitioning the gut so that it can eat those living high quality foods is key.
Why do you suppose some children, very young children who are raised in families where people eat more conventional diets, wake up one day or are born into the awareness that they don't want to eat meat and they are vegan and they have very, very specific diets, when there's no indication of that in their family or their lineage? Is it because they have some sort of multidimensional sensitivity and so they're feeling the vibration of the food? And do you have any theories on that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just that, like, it doesn't, where they're coming from, which is like an ascended state of like from different star systems, that their consciousness does not comprehend it. It like doesn't compute. And it's like, why would I kill that and then eat that? Like it just doesn't make sense at all. And vibrationally, it doesn't feel good. And I know that because I was raised vegetarian, and my brother we'd go fishing and I wouldn't eat the fish. And he would just be like, come out and eat it. And it's like this dead thing that was like flopping around and like so sad. And then they like spewed the guts out. And I'm like, why do you want me to eat that? Like, it doesn't make sense. So I kind of grew up on that tip, so I can kind of understand where these kids are coming from. And it's part of their role. It's part of their mission to be like, hey, I'm coming here to teach you a way that we can better interact with our bodies, with our energies, and with the world. And so they're really coming in as teachers, and even if it doesn't exist in their family, that's even more reason why that kid would need to come down and help educate, so that we can all go up and upgrade ourselves together.
Well, along those lines, I find a lot of people, now there are many people who are, such as you, born into families that seem to resonate with who you are, and your father was already into a lot of spiritual things, from what I understand. But many people, many spiritually aware adults, are born into families that are highly unconscious, that are very much opposed or even afraid of these kinds of conversations. Why do you suppose that is, that they would choose that kind of a family to come into when their path was so radically different?
Yeah, to understand. I mean, really to understand this dimension, this density, and what they're dealing with. Like, it's kind of like you have to understand the game you're coming into. And so if they came in just completely like taken care of in this womb space, especially the few generations up, they would have no capacity if they were ever unleashed into the matrix world to survive. It's kind of like a training ground. And so nowadays there's enough built up now, frequency wise, lifestyle wise, in many places around the world, where if you truly shelter a kid but really maintain this vibrational thing, they can hold that, and they can, if taught in the right way, handle and go into the old world and do it well. So we're in a different situation now, but in these past generations, because all of the older generations from me up, we are playing in the two worlds. These new kids might not be as much, and that's why they can get away with just having it be awesome, which is great. But we've needed to figure out how living in the two worlds work. And I think it's coming to a place of gratitude with that, because even me, even though my mom and dad were very different and alternative and open, I was in a completely conservative Mormon culture. And so I got to feel all of like what that felt like, and feel like the black sheep, and very strange. And I am so grateful for it, because now I have the resilience to understand them, and understand me. So I think in certain ways, once you can get through the challenge of it, it ends up being a gift in the long term.
Other than just regular dietary practices, do you think that plant medicines have any place in a healthy diet and lifestyle, such as Chinese herbs or anything like that? Or is that really unnecessary if you're having a pretty good diet overall?
I would say everything. Do everything you can, because there's the Ayurveda tradition, Chinese medicine tradition, the old, even just like Western herbalism tradition. All of those are incredibly helpful. And the old ones have been studied and perfected. So why would we not use these perfected sciences to really help accelerate our consciousness? That's what they were doing back then. A lot of them, especially like in Tibet and stuff, they're ascending, and they're like, here, have this herb brew, what is it called? I'll think of it in a second, but there's like a certain herb blend that you can take when you transition off of food before you're going to fully ascend. And it's like, well, they figured it out, so let's do it. So I definitely think that everything is good to explore, and there's going to be certain things that resonate, certain things that don't. But taking it all in and not just going with one system is really important, because we have a lot of other constraints in this world, so in especially the Western world, whether we're working or not, our kidneys, adrenals, more fatigued, more stressors, all these different things. It's like, okay, well, let's get some allies here. Let's get some adaptogen herbs, and let's really heal our kidneys. So I think that we can take as many tools and take as much as we can, not to the degree of where you're taking 100 things a day and you're just not aware of it, but where you're very systematically and presently taking in the things that you need, and going to the specialists and getting, the mineral tests done and things that you need, so that you know what you need to upgrade your system to its fullness.
I've had some really interesting people on my show in recent months who are experts in ancient civilizations, and it seems like their research is really rewriting what we've known or have been taught in mainstream academic research in those areas. And it appears that the civilizations on Earth in previous times lived for many hundreds or thousands of years, and were also of a higher consciousness. Now, it appears that we're in a similar time now where consciousness is growing, but I don't see that much evidence as whether human lifespan is going to be extending. Do you see any evidence of that? And do you think diet plays any role in that?
I love this. Great topic. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if we've never seen it, then it's hard to imagine. So if it's like, okay, well, what do you look like at age 50? What do you look like at age 80? How do you move at age 80? And there's these cultural programs of what that looks like. By the time you're 80 or 90, you're like half hunched over and probably have like a walker or are going in that direction. But if we can like reframe the mind, especially from a young age, and go, okay, what if I wanted to live to 150? What would I do to then create that life? And that's part of it too, is like, it's a lifestyle. And so that's something that like has came to me at a young age when I was actually in Boulder, Colorado, when I was 19. I was like, I kept on getting this message. It's like, do low impact exercise and really take care of yourself. Like I kept on getting this really strong guidance, like do yoga, like swim, like really take care of your body. And I'm like, where is this coming from? But it's really true, because if we just take care of our bodies as well as take care of our lifestyles, again, where it's like we spend time in nature, we're not having the high stressors, and we're more going towards the longevity, that shift in consciousness will shift our actions, shift our perspectives, shift our energetics to where we're prepared. So it's like you reach for 150 and you land at 110 and you consciously exit and you could still walk up a mountain, you know? So it's just a matter of reprogramming where we want to go and what we want to do with it, and actively programming that quite often, because the current of the culture is going to say, time for your gray hair. And it's like, no, it's actually not. I'm good. And then incorporating the things that can help benefit you towards the fruition of your longevity intention.
So do you think as on an individual level, though, that human beings can actually alter how long they live, or do you think that to some degree we're predestined to live a certain kind of lifespan to fulfill certain things, and when that time is over, it's over?
If you have the consciousness to be able to have this conversation, you can alter it. If you don't, then you probably can't. So if we're consciously talking about this, then we absolutely can. And it can go, I think, I mean, I've heard from like maybe Corey Good or something, that it could go that we're meant to live, that our vessels can actually last, because the 250 years or something. And there's actual still yogis and different people in the East that are like hundreds of years old. And in our history, they've lived for hundreds of years. So it's really just getting to that point. So we absolutely have the capacity to do that. It's just a matter of tapping into that stream and going for it.
You've mentioned earlier on having DMT experiences in certain water. And so have you ever tried any plant medicines such as ayahuasca or anything else that altered your consciousness in some way?
Yeah, so I did try ayahuasca because, again, it was like I had never done anything. And all these people around me were like, well, you don't know. You think you're having these spiritual experiences, but you don't know. And so I was like, okay, fine, like I'll try it. And it did end up being that a lot of my conscious, sober experiences are completely, DMT and ayahuasca-like. But I did try ayahuasca, and it was profound. And it really connected me in actually with the earth. And I had all the visions and had all the experiences. The circle was like a mess because the shaman was like doing all these things on like a darker level. So on my first ayahuasca thing, I'm actually like helping the group like rebalance, which was kind of funny. And I didn't actually purge. Maybe I would in other ones because I do have a healthy diet. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't purge. I know you purge emotionally too. So yeah, I have tried it.
And do you think so you've had these experiences prior to that. Do you think that well, what I'm curious about is if somebody already has a higher spiritual consciousness, such as you obviously had because you were having those experiences even prior, is it a necessary path that they should consider to take to spiritual opening, or if they're already on that path, then it may not necessarily contribute that much to them?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's one of those things that if it's a person whose mind, like if you watching this, or someone's mind just needs to be blown open, like it's one of those things where the software program just like won't delete itself and it needs to be deleted for a new one to come in. I think blasting, in that way and kind of getting the muck out of the way can be a good thing in certain situations, or to really break through certain situations. I think it can be a crutch, and I think a lot of people in the spiritual community doing it every weekend or every month, are maybe taking it too far. I mean, of course, it's all everyone's own journey, but I feel like that we can do it without it. And so as long as people are still doing the work sober, consciously pushing themselves and surrendering themselves in that way, then utilizing it as an additional tool can be helpful.
Now, you mentioned Corey Goode earlier. I know you're friends with him and familiar with his work. Now, a lot of the things that Corey's talking about are pretty far out and quite a bit different from the society that we're consciously living in every day, that most people watching the show are aware of anyway. What do you think about that? I mean, it's obviously some of those things are easy to accept that they could be really happening, but some of the experiences that he's described or things that he's seen on his little glass tablet seem like an entirely different dimensional reality. Do you think that is part of this dimensional reality, or do you think that some of that may be existing in a parallel reality that we've not yet merged with?
That's a good question. I've gone into this a lot, with myself, because I'm friends with him, and I think that it is a different parallel reality, and yet it is, concurrent with ours. So it is. So and there's this time. This is like crazy timeline, parallel reality play right now. And so it's like, what are the things that we want to like include in our timeline reality? Is the big question for me. It's like, what timeline do I want to have, and what are the results and consequences of what I am taking in, and what I am going forward with. And this goes for everything. This goes for everything we've been talking about with the food, with just different perspectives. And so I really like how his information like blows open my mind, especially in the categories of inner earth, which I've had a lot of experiences with. So that was very validating for me. Connecting with these different planets and civilizations just in our solar system, because a lot of that I've connected with are a little bit farther away. And so just like really kind of remote viewing for me, these other places and these other ways of interacting with certain beings has just been really nourishing and for my soul. And then there's other aspects of the whole thing which has just been like not positive for me to ingest, and it has resulted in certain cases in me lowering my vibration. And of course there's these moments where things come up and you're meant to assist in certain ways, and I'm totally willing to do that, even if I'm meant to, for the greater good, kind of shift in a new way that might go through negativity for a moment to blast it to a new level of positivity. So that's not really specific, but it's that there's really helpful parts and there's not. And I think it's just being really conscious of why. Like, why are you doing it and what are you getting out of it? And so those are the questions I ask myself. And I'm getting a lot of benefit out of certain things, and other things I've had to turn off.
And what are your personal experiences of the inner earth and the civilizations there? And does any of it line up with what Corey's been talking about?
Yeah, pretty much everything has lined up. And I've had other friends too that have like met inner earth reptilians and like like a lot of different things. And this was from like 10, 15 years ago. So I've had a lot of different things line up to where I'm like, yeah, that's going on. During the time a few years ago, it was about a few years ago, my friend and I started to really just keep on getting called and feeling a telepathic connection with beings in inner earth, as well as feeling the portal entries. Because whenever we go to these sacred sites, a lot of the sacred sites are portal entries to the inner earth, to other dimensions, to stargates. And I just kept on, like, you know, I'd go to a certain place and be like, oh, if I really like let myself, I could go, like, am I ready? And so I played with that for a good year and a half. And then right about when Corey's information came out, like at the exact time he was talking about inner earth, I went down to Havasupai, which is in the Grand Canyon, and it's absolutely magical. And I slept there for about a week in nature and was drinking out of the sacred springs, going into these selenite caves a mile deep in the Grand Canyon. I mean, it was just like as magical as you can get. And I, night after night, was having these dream connections with the civilization, with the inner earth civilization that was connected to that place. And I was like initiated, and they did this water ceremony with me, and all this stuff happened. And then I came back from that trip, and then all the inner earth stuff was out, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And then over the months, I had different connections in Sedona where there were inner earth, again, kind of ceremonies that I was a part of. So I've had experiences, and vibrationally, it's a great connection, and I'm really pleased that all of that's coming to light.
So these experiences you had were multidimensional out-of-body experiences, or were they physical contact of some sort?
They were multidimensional experiences. I know when I have like a physical experience, it was more of an out-of-body experience that I was having.
And these reptilian races, so they're all reptilian races you're coming in contact with? Are there any other races that you're aware of that are in the inner earth?
Oh, so there's the reptilian ones, which, you know, not so pretty. And I went on this hike in the middle of nowhere in Utah through these narrows one time, and this was before any of this again, and I was like, I have to get out of here. There is like crazy reptilian energy, and so I jetted. But as far as the reptilians, like, I don't care about that part. But the benevolent inner earth groups, which I've connected with, the one under the Grand Canyon, was half native and half ET. So like when I met them, I was like, you're Native American, but you're also ET. And they're like, yeah. And so in a lot of the legends of the different native cultures, whether it's South America, Central America, or North America, all talk about where it's like, where did the certain Native American groups go? Like they just disappeared, you know, and some went back, you know, to the stars, like the Toltecs. But some went inner earth. And so they were pretty much saying like, we're the Hopi, we went inner earth, like when things went awry. And so they went inner earth, and that's what they were showing me. So there are definitely a lot of different benevolent groups, ones that I'm sure have ulterior motives. There's the reptilians. There's a lot going on, just like on the surface. So, but there are good ones to connect with.
In the past year, there's been a lot of very interesting things happening in the world, including what was brought to the mass consciousness about the Mandela effect, which seems to be pointing to the possibility that we shifted timelines. Do you have any perception of that? Have we shifted timelines in the past year, in our past linear year, to a different version of reality?
Yeah. I mean, we're shifting all the time, like all the time, like and especially because some of the possible timelines especially come through the sacred sites and are also generated through the sacred sites, whether it's from like the negative version kind of pumping in certain timelines, or just true cosmic forces creating the benevolent ascension transformational timelines. And so being in Sedona for those years, it's like every few days, it was like this current like of this timeline would come through. Like it seemed like come onto the planet and then come through for the first time. And then another one would come through and I'm like, just like, whoa, like I could really feel a lot coming through. So when you say the Mandela effect, there's multiple, and I'm happy to be in the reality of the Mandela effect, and that where people, it is a concept where people can see that there are lots of different ones, because that in and of itself shows that we're a more multidimensional culture at this time.
And so do you think, do we have a collective timeline that the whole of the Earth consciousness is experiencing, or does each individual, based on their own consciousness, tune into their own unique timeline that's slightly different?
It's a great question. I would say, in my experience, there are collective timelines, and you can jump on them personally. So it's kind of both, where there's a current that's a collective version, but your vibration determines which collective one you go on. If that makes sense.
And in the past year, of course, in the United States in particular, we've had a change in the political system and a new president in place. Not that that really matters, but nonetheless, the mainstream consciousness is very focused on that as something of significance. Do you think that there's any relevance to this particular? Now, I'm well aware that our presidents are not chosen by voting, but really by the consciousness of the planet, and in particular, the consciousness of the country. But do you think there's any relevance to this particular individual coming into this prominent position of our collective consciousness? Does that indicate anything has changed for the better or worse in terms of our evolution?
Yeah, when all that was going on, boy, I mean, did you feel it too, Ethan? Like, it's like, wow, I've never felt like such like a big collective like intensity. I mean, like 9/11 was probably like the last time something like that palpable was in the United States field. Like, I was like, whoa, okay. But at that time and since, I've felt really good, to the degree of, if say like Hillary, for instance, got in, she was more representative of suppression, of like hiding things. And so at least Trump, he's like very out there about what he's doing and very disclosed, even though it's like not clean and it's very strange and not positive in so many ways, but at least it's up and out. So for me, it was really like a collective detox where everything has to come up and out. And so for me, it was a positive thing. Where it's going to lead, I mean, at least it's leading to the people realizing that they have to do it themselves. And I've seen that on like regional levels, where like in California, they're like, well, we're just going to do this ourselves then, because you're going to screw up the climate agreements, or we're going to do this ourselves, whatever it is. So I think it's created more regional and personal responsibility and action, which I think is a great thing, because the big government, it was never necessarily meant to do everything anyways. So I think there's a lot of benefits, and then we'll see what happens with the other parts.
So is there a definite timeline future for the human civilization that is already written, or is it a consciously evolving, moving thing based on our own development? Have you ever been shown anything like that, and what's your belief on that?
I think there's a lot of different versions. I think ultimately I think there's a lot of different versions. I mean, ultimately it's going to lead to transformation. I think the actual apocalyptic timelines are over. Like, it's like, okay, that's done. I think we've gone through that through 2012 and a lot of those years in like a massive scale way. I think there's variations on how positive it goes. I've been shown very, very positive ones. 1,000 years in Earth's future, which is very interesting. That I'm always shown hundreds of years into the future, thousands of years into the future, because when you shoot your consciousness like really far, then coming back to now it's easier to shift in a different way. So I do think, is it destined? Yeah. Yes and no. I think we ultimately will be where we are meant to be by the choices we make, which is what we already were destined to do.
What do you think about, there are some prominent spiritual figures that I've even had on my show who are predicting World War III. Why do you think that is? And do you think that that's even a possible reality in any timeline that we're heading into?
These timeline things and this Mandela effect thing, it's so profound and so interesting, because in my reality, which is the reality we're co-creating right now, and whoever listens to this, no. No, I can't even perceive it, and yet for other people it still might be the case. But the only thing that I know is that really, and this is the big thing, like working with the all the stuff that Corey's bringing through, working with my own energies over the past year, working through all these timelines coming through Sedona. It really comes down to like digging so deep into myself and really putting as much action and effort and intention and surrender into the reality that I want to create. So if anything, it's like really choose, because we can be easily like swayed and just kind of like toss like a toy when we hear these different things or when we perceive these different things. And I feel like a steadfast like determination from our guts is really necessary to determine where we end up. It's going to take a lot of passion and will to clarify with your own like higher self and source and where you get organized to say, I'm choosing this one, and I think that that's really important. And I think the other energies can want to easily sway in different directions. And so that self-determination is very important.
I know you and your dad are working on some kind of conscious community project, right? What's the status of that? Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so right now the status is my dad's he's setting up a community. We've set up a community house in Sedona, so that's going. But how he's transitioning is he's going to start creating investment kind of properties that are actually trust community houses or properties in different sacred sites around the world, but it can actually be kind of like funded and taken care of in a 3D way by the like Airbnb model. So that's one of the things that he's doing. And once he gets these houses that people can come just like be in and have the freedom to expand and to create from their passion and purpose, then they can be more free. And then from all that's creating, then bigger properties can be bought and worked on from there. So that's what his status is. And my status, it's a little bit more disconnected from that at this particular moment. I'm of course still connected to it because it's what I'm doing, but where I'm at and where I'm meant to go right now is still a little bit unclear. I'm meant to go to a lot of different places around the earth and a lot of different sacred sites and meet a lot of different people. So that's where I'm at right now, I guess, on like the social end. And where that will lead, I'm not sure. So I'm in this like, I've gotten a new assignment. I'm not sure what it says yet. It's an invisible assignment.
So, what's the long-term vision for this community project? Is there one at this time?
The long-term vision, which actually is kind of bleeding into Bentinho Mazzaro's, because he just moved to Sedona, and we've all been connecting, and he wants to buy land and have it be a space for people to come freely. So he's talking to my dad. So it's kind of, it's not ours, it's the world's, you know, and how it manifests in lots of different ways. Ultimately, it's like really living in community, living in very natural spaces, living in new spaces and new ways with each other, and geometries that, you know, architectural geometries that assist the expansion, creating from a place of passion, creating in harmony with earth and all the different sacred sites around the world, so that the sacred sites then act as transmitters, which they already are, but are kind of a little bit more under the rule of the negative side. So it's really acting as transmitters of many new collectives, many new templates that then beam out and influence everywhere around the world. So that would be kind of the ultimate vision, which is not just our vision. It's, I mean, Sasha Stone's, it's Bentinho. I mean, we're all getting the same one in different ways, and we all have different roles in it, but ultimately we're meant to come together, and we're meant to be free so that we can truly expand, we can truly create and be who we want to be.
I mentioned you're on a new path now. So are you permanently moved to Massachusetts then?
No, so I'm just here for the summer. I'm going to Europe in September to do a lot of events and visit sacred sites, and then going back to Sedona for an event. Then we're going to the other side of the world for the winter. So we're going to Bali and Australia, New Zealand, maybe Japan, coming back to Hawaii in March for another event. So I'm like all over the place. And that's what I'm meant to be doing. And where will I land? I'm not sure. My dad might be kind of like Sedona hub, and I might get land with my partner Patrick on Hawaii. I'm not quite sure yet. Like I haven't gotten the full assignment. All I am is on leave duty, visiting the sacred sites and connecting with people.
So is it clear? So it sounds like it's not really clear what direction you're going in your work either, right? Okay.
No, I mean, I know that one of the big things, and I guess this is my personal work, is really going to deeper, profound places in myself and cultivating my abilities. So I feel like a deep meditative practice. I really want to work with Max Christensen, the one that does the Kunlun method, and get into more earth shamanism and create the capacities in myself to transform this reality and to really bring magic to full fruition and as a, I think, example of empowerment, of awakening of what other people can do. So to continue expanding myself to reflect that out as a path that is ready to be explored by anyone who chooses.
So you've been in this relationship for what, a year now? Has it been?
With Patrick?
Yes.
Actually, almost 4 years.
Oh, that long.
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't remember that.
Yeah, and he's on the journey with me. So we're traveling, and we're both right now, because Sedona is incredibly transformational. It's very intense, especially living there. And in that intensity, and also in the creation, because we've been doing a lot of creation, physicalization of videos and different things, going back inside, going back in and cultivating is kind of our passion, at least for the next 6 months and beyond, to truly get to these next levels of program software, to be like the little 1-year-olds.
A lot of people in spiritual conversations find themselves waking up one day in relationships that don't really resonate with who they have become. Yeah. And many of them end up single and searching for their quote unquote soulmate. So you think that it's important to find, is there a one single person who is your ultimate soulmate who and many people believe is when you find that person, you're going to discover your path and be in the fullest expression of who you are. Is that necessary, do you think? Do you think that having that relationship has in some way enhanced or made your own life mission more powerful?
Good question. Yes. In a general sense for others, and then for me personally, for others, it's like, is there the ultimate person? I mean, for viewership and for everyone's egos, I could say yes, but I don't think so. I think there's many people. I think there's many activators along the path for many different purposes that will awaken us in so many different ways. And understanding it from that perspective actually will allow those people that need to come in and influence in different ways to come in. So that's what I'm going to say. Maybe not a popular one, but whatever. And then as far as me personally, yeah, my relationship with Patrick's been incredibly expansive. He's pushed me to deepen in lots of ways. He's shown me like love and unconditional support in so many ways. He's been like my friend on the path, to be like, okay, what should we do next? What should we do next? And like to backboard bounce different ideas and different concepts, like all the different timeline stuff we were talking about, between me, my dad, and Patrick. It was like, we're figuring all this out. So it's really fun. So I feel like, is it necessary? One, I mean, being single, you can go pretty far because, you can be on your own personal independent path. And like, actually all the guys that we're living with are doing that right now. I'm living with 4 other single guys in the house, and they don't want any kind of relationship because they're on the internal path by themselves. And that has its own place because you can go far. You don't have distraction, really. Whereas in relationship, you're being put up against your own like reflection and challenges. And so a lot more comes up. So for me, it's a faster path in a certain way, because it challenges on a human level. And it also can be expansive to see your blind spots in a new way because that person's going to hold you accountable. So I think that it's really helpful and to be in partnership and to have support, to have camaraderie, in these changing times. It's like through the volatility, it's like you guys are there and you guys are going for it. So I think it's really helpful, whether that's a partner, whether that's good friends, whether that's good community, having buddies like along the path that are like there. And it's like, what are you going through? Cool. Like, okay, what are you creating? Are you really doing it? I'm holding you accountable. So I think relationships are very helpful. Do they have to be romantic? No, not necessarily. And relationships are very important on so many different levels right now on the path.
Do you find that your relationship, although it's much more spiritually based, do you still experience challenges, more conventional challenges that any regular relationship may go through, or is it always blissful and positive and supportive?
It's not always blissful and positive. It is a lot of the time, it is like most of the time. And then there are those like, those things, those triggers that come up, those certain patterns that we have in our particular dynamic, because it can be a lot of different things for different dynamics, like what comes up to the surface. And so, yeah, it does get into the human element often. And I think that that's important, actually. And as I want to learn to call the rain gods down and change climates and do all kinds of awesome things, I think it's just as significant to figure out the inner workings of men, or to understand how to communicate better. I think that playing on both of those levels and being like, okay, I need to do more human work. I need to do more interpersonal work. And then it's like, okay, I need to do more expansive work. I need to do more meditative work and spiritual work. I think really keeping both of those going is so important, because sometimes you see people that have really developed themselves spiritually, but they can't like talk or interact or bring those experiences back or in certain ways, or vice versa. Someone's in the human drama too much and then they can't go to the next level. So I think going back and forth is really important, and it's been helpful for me to experience.
So when you're giving a lot of talks and events around the world, what's the nature of the events nowadays that you're doing, even though I know it's evolving as we speak?
Yeah, it's very dependent on the place, because the place determines the energy and like what inspiration comes up. So and the one, we're actually having one next weekend on the East Coast, and this one is connected to the star seeds and the hybrid children and your soul mission. And I'm doing one in Amsterdam in September that is a similar topic. And then I'm doing one in Glastonbury that's more connected to the sacred, to magic, to divine expression. So that one's that. And then like in Bali, I want to just do an art workshop. Like it's color therapy, chakra activation, art workshop. Like that's just what I want to do. So I just kind of go with whatever I'm inspired to do. And then it always ends up working out.
And I've noticed that you've really become quite a sensation online in the past year, that since I've had you on the show before, your viewership has gone up so dramatically. It's quite noticeable. So what do you attribute to your success?
That's a good question. Well, one, I think it helped that that Corey Good connected with me, and he was very supportive, and he's very unconditionally loving and supportive. He's awesome. So he just like shared tons of my videos and did the interview with me, and I think that really helped. I also started doing more programming research on algorithms, on YouTube algorithms, because one of the things that I care about for myself and other creators, especially in our category, is that people see it. Like you can either see the dog pooing on the grass or some weird, strange YouTube video, or you can see something that's going to awaken you. And so I'm like, well, I'm putting in the effort and other people are putting in the effort. And it's like, there's no reason why we can't use the system to help boost the algorithms and play the game right of what YouTube wants. So I would say that that's the other thing that I've done.
And so from all the people you're coming in contact with in the world and the direction you're observing things going, and your very many friends that are involved in these different fields, it sounds like you see a very positive future for us in the direction that we're heading already, in from many perspectives, right?
Yeah, I was born this way. Like I've been really positive since I was like little, and the first books, but not naive, like the first books that like my dad gave me, which is weird, were like about climate, like all the pollution and like how the world's like being destroyed. It's really strange. It's actually like one of the first books I got, and I like looked through it, and it was kind of like, this is the earth you landed on, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. And so I'm not naive to all the stuff going on, but having a positive outlook and going in that direction is really all that we can do. So I'm just going for it, and everything reflected in my reality says that that's true too. So that's all I can do.
So to sort of recap many ideas you shared today, if we want to live, let's say, to 150 years, is it more important that we eat the perfect diet, or is our attitude and perspective more important? Suppose we have the perfect diet, or we even, live food diet or whatever is ideal for our area, but we are more depressed or more pessimistic. Is that working against us?
Oh yeah. I mean, number one, like, be positive, be relaxed, like not stressed out, and figure out a way to create an environment and an internal state that can do that. I mean, I've seen so many people that are like perfect eaters, like as far as perfect vibrational eaters, and one of my friends, for an example, and she's dying. Like it's not working out, and it's like really sad because it's really on the emotional level, and making sure that the relationships in your life, your work, all these different things are feeding you and not draining you. And that's more important than anything. And when you get into balance on all those levels, the food will naturally come up. Like the high vibrational food and how you can do it will come up. So it's like change. And sometimes it's harder, like change those relationships, change that work, change, where you live, and the other stuff will fall into place.
If our viewers want to find you wherever you're doing your workshops and get involved, or even have a session with you, can you share some contact information?
Yeah. So my website, which is bridgetnielsen.com, everything's on there. And then my YouTube channel, which is Bridget Nielsen. You can find me. Between those two, that's where most of the information will be of like how to get in contact with me and see the content.
Well, any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our community?
So there's so much pressure. Smile. That's like smile. Like when you're feeling down, and even when you're feeling happy, just like, even if it's forced, just like smile and even giggle at like the craziness of the world or your life, and also the beauty and the bliss.
Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show again after a year, and I look forward to following your work and hopefully having you out here sometime in the near future.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. It's been great connecting with you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wake and Empower TV with my special guest, Bridget Nielsen. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on the leading edge and changing the world.